coming into this space, you carry some of that with you. You carry some of that competitiveness. You carry some of that with you. But then as time goes on, you realize there's no ladder to climb. There's no bigger piece, right? You can expand the pie. You can do what you want to do. Like a lot of the things that I've learned in the business world is often in the corporate world, I would think, oh, this is how things are meant to be because this is how they're meant to be. But whereas here, it's an open field. Like, pricing, how do you price things? Well, you make up the number.
Have you ever considered a move from employee to entrepreneur? It's hard, but like anything hard, it's rewarding. Today we dive deep with Sangeeta Mulchandani, once a C-suite dynamo, now the brilliant mind behind Jumpstart Studio. Sangeeta mentors budding entrepreneurs. She's here to spill the beans on her own journey, the allure of charting her own course, and the power of trustworthy allies in the world of business. Enjoy my conversation with Sangeeta. These are my 3 key takeaways from my conversation with Sangeeta. So what was it that sort of motivated you in that shift from employee to entrepreneur?
I think a couple of things. So if I backtrack a little bit, I moved to Australia as an international student. I already had work experience. I worked in Africa. So my career started in Africa. I was born and raised in India. My career started in Africa. But when I came to Australia to do my master's degree, my work wasn't recognized. My experience wasn't recognized. Everywhere I would apply, they would be like, hey, do you have Australian experience? You don't have any Australian experience. We can't give you a job. And so my ambition and my dream at that point became just getting a good corporate job. I would walk the streets and I would look at these big buildings and glass buildings and I'd be like, I want a corner office there someday. You know what I mean? So, and I think for a lot of migrants and international students who come to this country, that is a reality they're looking for, they come with the goal of, getting a good job, settling down in this country and all of that stuff. And fast forward maybe about 8-9 years from then, I was achieving everything I wanted to achieve in my corporate career. I was, climbing. I was in a talent program at my employer. I was climbing the ladder successfully. And I had everything I ever dreamed of. A great house, a great family, a great career, everything. And I was still unhappy. I was still depressed. And so for me, that around 2016, 2017 was the turning point where I was just really, I have everything I want, and why am I still not happy? Why am I not fulfilled? Why am I not satisfied? I think what I didn't realize back then, which now I do in retrospect, is I sort of probably my whole, so how with the Maslow's hierarchy, you sort of, you're climbing up that sort of hierarchy, and at some point it's not just about you anymore. It's about how you can give back to the community, how you can serve the community, how you can serve other people. And I think I'd sort of reached that tipping point where my success was not good enough. It was important for me, how am I able to help other people succeed? And because in a corporate environment, there's very limited opportunity to do that, I think I felt very stifled. And at a point in time, I was like, okay, something has to change. So in 2017, I thought, well, maybe it's Melbourne. That's depressing me, and I need to get out of Melbourne. I went out for a whole year. I traveled the world. I was a digital nomad and remote working before remote working was a thing in Australia. I lived and worked across 25 countries over 1 year, across Europe, Africa, South America, and North America. And I spent a whole year doing that, and I was super happy. And then I came back, and then, my company pulled me back, offered me a double promotion, offered me a lot of perks, and, they were like, come back, we need you. And so I came back to Melbourne, and then within 2 or 3 months, I was unhappy again. And so I was like, maybe it's not Melbourne, maybe it's work. And I think that's where my switch sort of flipped a little bit. And I thought, well, I'm a third generation entrepreneur. My parents were entrepreneurs, my grandparents were entrepreneurs. I was probably the first to go to a job, and I thought, this is my calling to go back to that entrepreneurial roots that I have. So I think that's really where it all began.
It sounds like your reason for, wanting that corporate job and the corner office and those sorts of things, and I guess maybe coming to Australia as a migrant for a better life, as they say. But then that journey, that mindset changed for you through that process. What was it about the work and the change that triggered it? What did you not like about the work that was causing the unhappiness?
So I'm a very direct, straight talk person. And I think in a lot of these corporate jobs, as I was climbing the ladder, I think one of the things that becomes quite apparent, and this is not just my story, I think this is everybody's story who climbs up the corporate ladder, there's a lot of political agendas happening at the top levels. And sometimes you're just playing to those agendas. So you come to a point where you're like, you're in a space where you're sort of not really doing the hands-on work, but at the same time, you're sitting at a spot where you're leading, managing, all of those things, but you're also playing to, higher agendas, which you may not even fully believe in, you may not fully agree to. So I think that was definitely one aspect of it. The other aspect, I think, is I was in banking. And so when I joined banking 8 years ago, from that point, I already sort of knew banking was not for me. I don't do very well with rules. I don't do very well with regulations, and banking is all about rules and regulations. But what really excited me about the job was the fact that I was on this talent program, which is called the Generalist Banker Program, and they were building a pipeline of future CEOs. And one of the aspects of the program was they were also going to offer you global mobility, which means you live and work in different parts of the world that have branches of the bank. And so that's where that was the really exciting part for me, because travel is something that's very dear to me. I love traveling, and I thought, this is great. I get to travel on the job. That's fantastic. So I think those aspects kept me in the job, and the fact that every 2 years, because I was on this trajectory, every 2 years they would offer me a different role. I would get to see different things. I would get to learn different things, and learning is a core value for me. So I think those things kept me in the job. But I think what I didn't like is the rules, the regulations, the political agendas as you climb up the ladder. There's sort of, just playing to other people's agendas rather than, really doing valuable, meaningful work that changes people's lives. And for me, I think that's the piece that got me unstuck.
Unfortunately, I think it's a journey for many, and you're probably a bit too kind, Sangeeta, to say sometimes there's politics. I think it's probably more often than sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's every day, really. Unfortunately, yeah, it is. And the thing is, it's not like there aren't political agendas in other areas of, business, but I think in that particular piece, it just started wearing me out. Like, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. There's a lot more, like, I felt like my potential wasn't being achieved because all I was doing was playing to other people's political agendas. A simple example is, in the last role that I was doing before I left to, learn to do my master's in entrepreneurship, which was around 2018, we were embarking on this transformational $30 million program that was going to be bank-wide, was going to change the way people did things. And I was super excited. And that's the reason I came back from my travels, is because, it was this really innovative, really fresh program that was going to change things. Because up until then, the bank was buying off-the-shelf programs from other companies, implementing it for 5 years, putting money down the drain, and then saying this doesn't work. And so this time we were going to try it from inside and really build things from the inside. And that was really interesting for me. That was the whole reason I came back. And I don't know if this is even believable, but I actually put together, in the 1 year that I was the director of that program, I actually had to put together 100 presentations. It might be even more than that, but at least 100 presentation packs, just PowerPoint presentations, saying exactly the same thing in different ways because people just wanted to listen to it differently, right? And I was like, I said this to you 6 months ago and you still want me to keep saying the same thing. And they were still not funding us. They were still not giving us the money. And after a year, I was like, okay, you know what? This, like, honestly, how much more can you do of that same thing when, people just have ego issues or have, issues with each other, which is why the program's not progressing. It's not because the team is incompetent or, we can't deliver the outcome. So, a lot of those things are really, these are things that put me off completely. They don't sit well with my value system. And I think for me, that was a very deciding point. And the funny thing is I took a year off. I went and studied my master's in entrepreneurship. And I came back because I took a career break and I had the option to come back into the organization. I came back into the organization, and within the first week, I was pretty much asked by my boss, "Hey, Sangeeta, we have to apply for funding." I'm like, "What? I got you the funding before I left. Why are we reapplying for the funding?" And they're like, "Oh, no, we have to apply for it every year." And to me, I'd gone out, built 2 businesses, made revenue, made customers, and come back. And I was being asked to do the same pack, the same presentation pack again after a year. And to me, that just, I was like, no, done. I'm over this. Like, I've outgrown this whole space. I'm wasting my time here. Like, I can do so much more good out in the world. I don't know why I'm spending my time putting presentation packs together for things that we've already spoken about, already been approved. So, things like that really bother me. Like, inefficiency bothers me. And I think, unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, there's a lot of inefficiencies, and the inefficiencies are not because people are not competent. The inefficiencies are because people just don't want to agree with each other. And, it's as simple as that.
Yeah. There's 2 words you've used just in what you've explained there, frustration and outgrowing. You're doing a lot of work in that startup space and entrepreneurs. And again, you've mentioned about a recent funding program you guys have been accepted into, which is fantastic. How many come to this entrepreneurial journey with that mindset of, hey, I'm just so frustrated, which is a little bit of we need frustration because it drives other things. There's a bit of negativity around that frustration, but then actually reframing that or coming with the frame of mind of, I've outgrown the situation that I've been in and moving forward. What's your experience around that?
I think frustration is real, and it's real for a lot of people that are even in the organization. So not just people who are looking to leave. A lot of people live with the frustration. I think that's one of the bigger problems, is that people live with it. They live with it because they feel like they can't leave it. They can't do anything about the situation. Whereas the people who do choose to leave are people who probably have what we call a higher inner locus of control. And locus of control really means how the environment around you affects you. There are 2 types of mindsets around this. One is the internal locus of control, and one is the external. So people who are of a high internal locus of control, they are people who feel like they can control their own situation. And, external situations don't affect them as much. They feel like they're masters of their own destiny. Whereas people with external locus of control are people who actually let the external factors affect them. And they say, well, I can't do much about it. Like, this is how things are. They sort of do that all the time. And so I think the people who have a higher inner locus of control or an internal locus of control are the people who leave, who sort of, make that shift and say, I can't deal with this, but I know that I can control how I'm feeling or what I'm going to do about it, and then do something about it. So we often see that come through in the startup ecosystem, and they're the people who are often also more successful as entrepreneurs because they feel like they can control things in a certain way. And I think frustration, to your point about, how much of it is real, I think, again, with people, they see things differently, right? For a lot of people, the fear of leaving their comfort zone, fear of leaving a job, that they feel is security, that they feel like the monthly income is secure, it's going to, feed their families, it's going to pay their mortgages. For a lot of people, that is a very real reason for not leaving, even if they're frustrated. And so a lot of times people who come into the startup ecosystem are fighting for something. They're trying to change something in this world. That may be coming from a place of their own frustrations, or that may be coming from a place of things that have happened to their family or a dear one or a loved one. There's something really, a force that's driving them to sort of make that change. And so unless there is that trigger point, that force, not many people make that shift.
In your own journey from employee to entrepreneur, what sort of challenges did you face along the way?
I think the first was as a migrant to this country. So like I said, I'm a third generation entrepreneur. I've grown up learning things about business, pricing, sales. I've sold things to people even before, like, I was 15 years old. So, like, I've done this. My family is a business family. Dinner conversations were all about business. We're all about, suppliers and, customers and how things are moving. And so I think I came from that lens. But for me, the biggest challenge, and so entrepreneurship was on my mind very early on, even when I was doing my master's here. I was like, hey, I sort of spotted entrepreneurial opportunities quite early on. The reason I didn't pull the trigger on it is because one was, this aspiration to have that, beautiful corner office in a building. But also the other one was, I always felt like I didn't know how to build a business in Australia. I'd seen my parents do it in India. I'd grown up in India and I'd sort of seen how it happens in India. But in Australia, I was just lost. I didn't have the support system. I didn't have the networks. I didn't have the friends. I didn't have the family support. So there was a lot of things in my own mind that were stopping me from making that change. But I think a lot of it was this fear of the unknown, fear of a new place, of not knowing what's coming. And who to go to? Where do I look? Where do I look for help? Where do I, do that? And I think for me, that was the first challenge for me to overcome, which is why in 2019, I decided to overcome that challenge by doing a master's degree in entrepreneurship. And coming from a very employee mindset, I think for me, the important piece was that I wasn't ready to just make the leap. So I was being very safe in the way that I was approaching things. I took a master's degree because I was like, okay, I'm going to go give this a try. If it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, at least I've got a master's degree to come back with, right? And somebody in the master's degree course, one of my colleagues actually told me, he was like, Sangeeta, you know what? All of us that are doing this course, we're cowards because we just don't have the guts to get out there and build the business, to start the business. We want to try the safe route. And that really hit me. And I was like, yeah, that's so true. Like, these are my own fears that were playing out. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges was, just finding ways that I could find out about how this whole thing works. How do I start a business in a country like Australia? What is the startup ecosystem? I didn't know anything about the jargon that we use in the startup ecosystem. I didn't know what's bootstrapping versus VC versus, so there's so many things that terms and, there's these, every sort of ecosystem, every industry has its own terminology, has its own, inroads. And I didn't know anything about that. So I felt like that was one of my biggest challenges was, finding those networks, finding the right people who can help me and guide me along the way. The second piece that I think was the biggest piece was my own mindset and identity. My identity and mindset was so intertwined with my corporate work. I was the director at ANZ. That was my identity. I didn't know who I was outside of that. And I think that was a big piece for me. That shift was massive. And I think I'm still shedding that identity. It's been 4 years and I'm still shedding some parts of that identity and embracing the unknown, embracing the startup ecosystem. I would like to think I'm doing a good job, but I think there are still days when I fall into that employee mindset and pull myself out of it. I'm like, not like this, like this. So, that still happens. But I think the realization came when, I'd taken that break, started my master's in entrepreneurship. And one of the first things they told me is, you've got to go out in the street. So we were building a project and one of our first entrepreneurial projects through the master's degree. And one of the things that I had to do was stand on the streets and interview people. We call the process customer discovery. And so, I had to get out there, talk to the customers, talk to random strangers and fill out a survey, get feedback from them. And on those streets, the director at ANZ Bank didn't matter, right? My title didn't matter because what I was building was a platform for senior Australians, for senior residents to get help. And it didn't matter that I was a bank employee or I worked in banking or whatever, or that my title was director. I walked into stores to have conversations with them about some of the questions we had for them. And people didn't want to give me time of their day. They were like, next time, book in some time before you walk in or, stuff like that. Whereas at ANZ, I would just send out an email and say, I'm Sangeeta Mulchandani, director, and doors would open for me. And so, things like that I had to shed and that's when the realization hit. Yeah, I mean, my corporate identity means nothing on the streets. It means nothing outside of the banking world or outside of the corporate world. And I think those sort of things are challenges or roadblocks that I had to overcome for my own mindset to be able to sort of, really lean into the entrepreneurial pathway.
Some great examples there, Sangeeta, and I've taken some notes to unpack at various times, but let's just focus on the couple of things you mentioned, particularly about finding people and the networks as a point one, and then that identity piece, point two. Point one, finding the networks, the mentors, the people. How important was that, and what did you do to overcome that challenge?
I think I often say this, and I say this to a lot of, I used to say this in the corporates, and I say this even now in the startup ecosystem. I think there are some transferable sort of skill sets around between the two ecosystems. But I think the one thing that I say to people often is it's not what you know that's going to get you where you want to go. It's who you know. And even more than who you know, it's about who knows you that's going to get you farther along. So I think people and networks are the most important thing when it comes to building any kind of a identity or business or whatever you're trying to do. I think you can't do it by yourself. You need people to do it with you. You need people to sponsor you, to champion you, to support you, to guide you. So there's different roles that people come and play in your journey as an entrepreneur or even as an employee, but also as an entrepreneur. There's different people that come in and out to play roles, and you've got to pick those people really wisely. And because it's whose advice are you listening to, right? So that matters as well. And I think for me, that journey started when I started my master's in entrepreneurship. I was introduced to some very interesting people through that degree. It's a 10-month degree, or it was. Now it's a bit different. But it's a 1.5 year degree it was 1.5 years crammed into 10 months. It was super intensive. It was, we got to meet, it just opened up the whole world of the startup ecosystem for me. And then I had this whole palette of people that I could pick and choose from, people that I could work with and test and learn with. And there were sometimes, they were just not the right fit as mentors or as supporters. And I sussed that out pretty quickly because I had the experience of working with people in my corporate world. I could sort of, I could figure out really quickly, if this is the person that will work for me, as a partner or as a co-founder or as a, mentor. So all of those things played out. And so I did have some co-founders through that journey in those 10 months, some that worked well, some didn't work well. I did have, mentors from the startup ecosystem. So they were all introduced to me through that course. But since I've sort of started doing it on my own, I think it's just been a lot of me having to find my ways. There's people that I follow on LinkedIn, for example, that I follow their work, I see what they're doing. And if, the value system resonates with me, I think that's important for me is the values really have to align. And this is something I've also learned on the journey is, you need people working with you. The vision needs to align. The values need to align. And I also tell people who come to coach with me, I'm like, let's do a test run. Don't just pick me as a coach. And I don't want to commit to just, mentoring you and coaching you for a long period of time. Let's do a test run for 4 weeks. And if we feel like we're the right fit, we can then talk about the next steps and the next stages. So I didn't do that before. So when originally I was coaching, I would just, say, okay, let's do 6 months together, or let's do, a year's program together. But if you're not working with the right people, it can really frustrate you and can really sort of drain you as well, your energies. And so as an entrepreneur, especially because I run multiple businesses as well, I need to choose very wisely where I spend my energy and who I spend it with. And I love working with people who want to sort of, achieve the same things that I want to achieve, or at least, are walking the same path, or are keen to sort of, do things together in a collaborative manner, to listen and to be listened to, I think are really important in any relationship. And whether that's as a mentor, mentee, whether that's as a co-founder, whether that's as a supporter, I think there's a lot of value in making sure people's opinions are listened to, but you're also, putting what you want out there. So there's a lot of things I've learned along the way, but to just to answer your question, I think it's really watching people, working with them, doing a bit of a test drive before you commit to anything longer term. I think that's where I find that I'm able to pick the people that I want to support, and that also I want supporting me on the journey.
Yeah, pretty sound advice. It sounds like the initial, can I say, limiting beliefs in relation to linked to doing the masters, it worked out pretty well for you because it opened up some doors and some opportunities with people. Let's narrow this down a bit. If you were to give advice today, and you do give advice to people today in this employed entrepreneurship journey, and they're not looking, it doesn't fit them to do masters, what's your advice to them to hone in on the networking, the building the network around you and seeking out mentors? What do you tell them?
So like I said, one is, if you want someone to be your mentor or be an advisor to you, follow them, follow their work first, check out everything about them. Today everybody's online. There's, a lot of content available online from people. So make sure, you read up on the content, make sure you look at what they're doing, follow them for a few months to see if, it resonates and if what they're putting out there can actually be helpful to you or not. I think that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is get out from behind the screens. I think I see far too many operators, far too many founders trying to build things behind the scenes and sit down on the computer for hours on end building things. I think it doesn't matter how much you build things unless you're out there talking to people and, from two angles. One is from a customer lens and doing your customer discovery, really understanding what people want before you build it. And on the other end, also then finding the right network and the support that can actually help you amplify what you're doing. And I think that's really important, is I think a lot of founders don't understand the value of amplifying their own work. And so these are things I normally coach people around is, getting out there, do at least 2 networking events a week. There is a startup ecosystem, no matter where you are in the world. Startup is the thing that people are talking about all the time now. It's not like it's a new thing. I think businesses have existed for many, 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 many years. So business is not a new thing. But I think now there's a lot more focus on startup communities or business communities. And my advice will be to get into those communities, to start understanding who's who in the zoo, start playing with them a little bit, start sort of collaborating, doing some partnerships, testing the waters, seeing what works, what doesn't work. Because I think, again, there's no right or wrong, and what may fit for me may not fit for you. Right? And so it's a very individual thing. There's no one size fits all. There's no one mentor that works for everybody in the world. Like, different people work for different people. And so you've just got to find the right match for you. But that comes through a bit of testing and learning. That comes through putting yourself out there and finding the right people. So I think the online piece is great, but I think the physical networking, people need to get out there and physically meet people. I think people get a sense for who you are and want to help you if you put yourself out there. But I see far too many people reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. They'd follow me for like 6 months and then they'd be like, "Hi, Sangeeta, I've been following you. Will you mentor me?" And I'm like, "But I don't know anything about you." Right? So let's jump on a call. Let's talk about it. Like, you not made yourself known to me for me to say, yes, I want to mentor you. Or, I get advisory board requests and people coming up to me, "I'm trying to build a business. I've seen your content. Would you be on my advisory board?" I'm like, "But I don't even know what you're trying to do. You know what I'm trying to do. You know what I'm building. But I know nothing about you because you haven't made yourself known enough to me for us to say, yeah, let's get into a partnership or let's get into a working relationship of some sorts." So I think it's very important for people to realize that they have to get out there and put themselves out there, both online and offline. I think both are equally important.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point that I take. Just putting yourself out there, but being deliberate as well, and not going with the mindset of taking, going with the mindset of giving and engaging with people's content and learning about that. And that puts you out there as a person who is willing to be open and learn and all those sorts of things, and puts you in, if you're looking to get mentored by Sangeeta as example, that if you're hearing and seeing these interesting and thoughtful type questions and stuff, that again, you want to be challenged as well. So those sort of things, people that are open to mentoring are encouraged by those sort of interactions, aren't they?
Yeah.
Let's look at the second point. You talked about your identity. That's a really interesting point and can certainly relate to it, finding yourself. You also said that that's something you're still working through. It's been 4 years plus in the making. Tell us a bit more about that journey.
I think I'm always finding myself. There's, I think I'm never feeling like, I'm there yet. So I think for me, it's a journey rather than...
You're telling me you're not the perfect human yet?
No, I don't think anyone is. I don't think anyone.
Me either.
And I love learning. I think for me, that's one of my core values is the love of learning. And, I'm curious. I like learning new things. I also am a very firm believer. It's one life, one world, see it all, do it all. I don't think there's, and that's why I think, it was when I'd sort of come to that point in my corporate career, it was time for me to, I felt like, yeah, okay, I've done this corporate thing. And if I want to do it again, I have enough qualifications, enough of a skill set to come back and do it at any other point in time. But right now, I just want the itch that I have is the entrepreneurial itch. And I don't know how long this will last. It may last forever. It may last for a few years. It may last for, 2 years more. I don't know. But the thing is, I like to go with the flow a little bit as well. So it's not as structured. I like to set goals and I have ambitions. I'm very ambitious. But my ambitions are not tied to I was on a pathway to CEO. But, to me, it was like, okay, after I become the CEO, then what? So what if I become the CEO? And I think that question that I keep asking myself really helps. It's like, okay, so right now I'm on a mission to empower 1 million entrepreneurs and professionals globally. And I ask myself that question too. Okay, so once you hit that, then what? And so the thing for me is, well, if I hit that, I'm empowering 1 million, but they may go on to empower even more. So, that's like an impact that I'm creating that's bigger than just me. And that's the piece that excites me about it today. Ask me in 10 years' time, I might say something else. But I think that's the thing. I think as human beings, we're always evolving, we're always learning, we're always, changing. And I love change. I love embracing change. I love embracing all newness that comes with it. So as an identity piece for me then is my identity, because for the longest time I was in the corporates, like I said, my identity was my title. And, that was something that I had learned to embrace as I was climbing that path. And because I was pretty much working around the clock, I would wake up and open my work emails first thing, even while still lying in bed to, when I go to sleep, the last thing I was checking was my work emails. And responding to work emails. And, so I was pretty much around the clock. There were nights where I wouldn't sleep and I would, wake up at 2 a.m. and I'd be like, okay, what do I do? Pick up my work emails. So my identity was tied to my work. It was so much about my work. So when I sort of stepped out, like I said, that instance of being on the streets and that first realization that my corporate identity means nothing in the big world out there. And then slowly from there, it was like, so who am I? What am I trying to do? What am I trying to achieve? Often when you're working in organizations, you start adopting the value system of that organization. You start adopting the mindset of the people you're working with. You start adopting the identity that they want you to have. And the missions and the visions of the business, of the organization. So when I started my own business, I was like, so what is my vision? And what do I want to create? What do I want to leave as a legacy in this world if I want to leave one? What do I believe in? What is my own value system? And I'm learning, I'm still learning as I work with more people, as I work with more projects and I do more things. I'm starting to really see what I like, what I don't like. Starting to understand this works for me, this doesn't work for me. In the corporate setting, you can't choose your bosses, you can't choose your colleagues, you can't choose the people that you work with. Here, I'm very conscious of the people that I work with. I'm very conscious of the people that I like working with. And if I work with some people and I don't like it, I'm very quick to say, this was great. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot, but I don't think this is working out for us. And I think being able to do that, having the freedom to do that, to be able to work with who you want to work with, working with people who uplift you and uplift your energy, rather than working with people that drain your energy and you can't do anything about it. Because, you're in that organization, you're in that structure. You can't change much about it. You can change some things, but there's not a lot of control that you have in choosing who you're working with. Your stakeholders, your partners, your colleagues, your peers, there's not a lot of choice. You can perhaps choose the people you want in your team. When I was leading teams, I could, hire and fire people, but there's other parts around that you can't choose. Whereas here I can choose. I decide if I want to take on a project or I don't want to take on a project. I take on a project if I feel like if I will enjoy working with those people and learn something from those people, but not because of the project itself. It's more the people that's important for me now. So, picking and choosing who I work with, understanding how to do that, I think is also part of my identity now. So, these bits and pieces make up your identity. And I think as I do more and more of it, I learn more about myself as much as I learn about working in this space and doing things. So it's a constant journey of, shedding some of those identity factors. In the corporates, I was a perfectionist. I would want to have things really perfect, do them, to the T. Whereas here, I've let go of that. I've let go of being so much of a perfectionist, just get things done. I think I value getting things done more than I value being perfect. Whereas in the corporates, I was very conscious of, whether I was doing the right thing, whether I was having the right, when this sort of, font is right, this sort of alignment is right. So those sort of things don't matter to me anymore. And I've learned that over time. It's perfection matters to me. I like to have things well presented, but it's okay if there's a typo in there. It's okay if there's a bit of a, as long as people are getting the message, the main outcome is being achieved. So those sort of things, I think, I still shed once in a while. I still try and control is another thing. As as somebody who's leading large teams across 33 countries, 120 people, control was another thing that was so important. Just making sure everything goes through, being a gatekeeper of sorts. Whereas here now, I try and let go of that. I just let people do what they need to do. And then, and building teams, building my own teams has been an experience, right? So just giving people the autonomy, empowering them. How do I make them feel like they own this as much as I own it, rather than me feeling like I'm in control? So those sort of things, you shed slowly. It takes time. There's a lot of conditioning that has to be unconditioned. So it takes time.
Certainly. Have you put much thought into the mindset shift that you needed when you think about, you talked about control, perfectionism as an employee and in those employee type roles and senior roles, but to the entrepreneurship, and you're saying letting go. What's the mindset shift that has happened or has had to happen?
I think I'm more invested in other people's success as much as I'm invested in my own. I think for me in the corporate, it was a lot about me. And I feel like that's an environment that's fostered in the corporate as well, where people are, you're sort of always looking for that next promotion or the next move or the next, next sort of climb. And I feel like people then are doing things with that motive in mind, whereas here there's no ladder to climb. There's nothing for me to fight for. And I feel these concepts I learned in the corporate, which is about expanding the pie. It's not a limited pie. When we talk about negotiations, when you talk about influence, you're not limited. You can expand the pie. There's more and da-da-da. But in reality, that's not how it plays out in the corporates. People always feel there's a limited pie. There's this, I want to beat this next person to the next promotion, or I want to beat this person on this, project, or, things like that. There's a lot of competitiveness. Whereas I feel like here in this space, I'm not competing with anybody as such. I'm competing with myself. I just want to be better than who I was yesterday. I want to be a better coach. I want to be a better mentor to people. I want to be a better program designer. I want to be able to deliver better outcomes for people. And for me, it doesn't matter anymore that I need to be the face of things. If I'm working with a team, I think for me, I would love for them to be the face of things. I would love for them to sort of, own things and be what it needs to be, as long as I know that my efforts are helping create that impact that I wanted to create. And so a lot of those sort of aspects, the mindset shift around that it took trial and error. I think, like I said, like moving out, coming into this space, you carry some of that with you. You carry some of that competitiveness. You carry some of that with you. But then as time goes on, you realize there's no ladder to climb. There's no bigger piece, right? You can expand the pie. You can do what you want to do. Like one of the things that I've learned in the business world is often in the corporate world, I would think, this is how things are meant to be because this is how they're meant to be. But whereas here, it's an open field. Like, pricing, how do you price things? Well, you make up the number. You figure it out. Like, it's something you look in the market. You can follow some certain frameworks to do it, but really it's on you. Like, you can choose what you want it to be. How do you make sure, what does my website have to look like? What does my logo have to look like? What does, so even simple things like that. Suddenly you're in the space where nothing is defined. Nothing is as it needs to be. You can just make it be. You can create what you want to create. And very often when I coach people for making that transition, or, even team members who are coming in and making that transition and, starting to work with me, they're like, how do we do this? Like, for example, one of my organizations is called Australian Professionals of Colour. We're a community organization. We started off pretty much as a social experiment a couple of years ago to see if professionals of colour wanted to come in and talk about the issues they face in corporate Australia. And it's been overwhelming. Like, we've now registered as a public company, registering as a not-for-profit. So in the 2 years, we've had that journey of, we've just created this out of thin air. Like, there's nothing to tell us you can't do this, right? And everything that we're creating. And so one of the things we did last year was we held the gala. We held the APOC gala, which is the first of its kind, bringing professionals of colour under one roof for a gala event. And it was such a massive hit. And one of the components of that event was an awards ceremony. And we just created 2 awards. Like, I didn't need anybody's permission to create awards to give people in the community who've done great work, right? And usually we think, oh, I got awards, so coveted, it's something that must have been ordained from somewhere. The reality is, in this space, you are the creator. You do what you need to do. And see that then people resonate with that, and people want to come and be part of it, and, want to nominate themselves for those awards, and, want to be recognized with those awards. We just created it from thin air. And I think that really helps in the mindset shift, right? So you bring a lot of that rules, and, you've got to have a way of doing things versus you set the way of doing things. And so you really have the power to change things. You don't have to do things a certain way if you don't want to do them. And I think that really helps with that mindset shift, with changing things.
Yeah, it feels like it's now a good time just to move into sort of skills and qualities needed, maybe different from an employee to entrepreneur, because the word that you've used quite a bit is, and you refer to as your core value, is learning. How important is learning as an entrepreneur?
you're always learning as an entrepreneur. I think, you go through these stages of when you start as an entrepreneur, you're really just testing things and, trying to build things. But as you progress, and at every stage in your entrepreneurship journey, I think there's different learnings, there's different things that you learn, there's different ways of doing it. Like, for example, somebody I was coaching just yesterday, he said to me, Sangeeta, I'm so lost. Like, I don't know anything about finances. I don't know anything about strategy. I just feel like I'm just blind, I'm leading into this dark alley and I don't know what's happening. And I'm like, so let's nut this out. You have two options here. You can build or you can buy. You can bring a CEO in, pay him money to run your company, somebody who has the skill sets who's done this before, or you can build the skill sets yourself. And so what do you think you want to do? And his answer was, yeah, I hear you. I said, but be aware that you bring a CEO in, you have to report into the CEO. So you lose a bit of control. Whereas here, you got the control and you can learn things and upskill yourself or surround yourself with the right service providers, the right people who can support you on the financial pathway, who can educate you along the way. And then in maybe a year's time, the conversation we're going to be having is quite different, right? And so I think that journey of building constantly happens for an entrepreneur. You're constantly building. Like, he's a fantastic founder. He's amazing product. They've already got traction in the market. They've got paying customers, all of that. And he's still feeling like he can't lead the organization or he can't lead because he doesn't have skill set in certain areas. I think that's the piece for most people is, there's always going to be gaps. There's always going to be places where you're not perfect or you're not, learning. But I think you've got to sort of push yourself a little bit and see if you can learn and push that way. The caveat to that, though, is I like the concept of playing to your strengths. So I'm not the kind of person who would say, go chase your weaknesses. If finances are your weaknesses, then I would say, give it a go because you've got to learn. You've still got to learn things. But I think at some point you've got to sort of say, here's where I need the experts to come in. Here's where I need, support and help. I know what this means, but, don't bring in help and support at a point where you know nothing about it and you feel like the expert is going to come and solve all your problems, because they're not. It's your business. You know everything about your business. So you've got to put some effort in to learn a few things. And then where you feel like this is it, here's where I need more help and support, bring people in to support you. But the ownership and accountability still sits with you as the founder of the business, as an entrepreneur. So I think the learning piece happens all the time. And as you grow from maybe a single solo founder to a 6-person team, then as you grow to a 20-person team, as you go from being $200 a month coming into your account to being like, $10,000 coming into the account from customers versus $1 million coming in, you're a different founder when you're a $1 million founder. You're a different founder when you're a $10,000 founder. And there's a learning that needs to happen between there and there. So I think there's always opportunities to learn and bridge the gap. And I think as long as founders keep that lens on, that you always got to learn, it never stops. I think that's a core thing that's required in entrepreneurship.
I'd also link it back to what you said earlier about finding, one of those challenges, finding people in the networks, because even from an entrepreneurial startup perspective, you can say, well, hey, you're not an expert in the financial space, you need to have some understanding, but how about we get someone in from building our network? Might be a commercial arrangement involved in that, but you're still building your network. There's a mentor that can help you and help you along the way to learn those things. So it all sort of becomes this nice, perfect world or entrepreneurial world that you're sitting in, depending on which way you look at that, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think it's important to build things I talk about often, and I talk about it in my book as well, is being building your own personal board of directors. Companies have board of directors, and the reason they have them is because they govern the organization. They sit at the top and have this big picture overview of this organization. And, they provide advice and support and, all of that strategic level, inputs. And you sort of need that for yourself as well as an entrepreneur at some point. Like that could be somebody from your family, somebody from your friends, pick a few people who you think can actually help you, and mentors, coaches, people outside of just friends and family, people who probably walked the path before, somebody who's doing exactly the same industry, but is perhaps maybe 3 years ahead of you. They walk the path, they know what it takes. So bring them on and build your own sort of personal board of directors that can, when you need to when you need them as a soundboard, when you're feeling up and down, because the entrepreneurial journey is not like this. There's like, it just goes in waves, and there are times when the lows are really low and the highs are really high, and you just want the right people there to support you through that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I want to touch on as we start to close out is you mentioned rules and regulations and the ability to sort of adapt and not, you are setting the rules. How important that is I'm not sure if we call that a skill or a character trait or something like that, but how important is that from an entrepreneurial journey?
I think as a founder, most founders that I've met and spoken to, I would say that they are people who want to set their own rules. I think there are people who are in this, and especially in the startup space, there are people who, like if you ask me, I don't know if I can go back and work for a boss anymore. I don't know. I've been offered job opportunities in these last 4 years, and there's just this feeling inside me. It's like, no. But ask me 10 years down the line, I don't know what I'm going to say. But but today that's where I'm at, and I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs are similar, where they value the autonomy, they value the feeling of being empowered and feeling of being able to do and create things that they want to create. I think founders in some industries do have to follow some rules and regulations. I would say things like banking or, insurance or the financial services pretty much, or legal. There are certain rules that are in place in some of those industries where, founders may have to stick to those rules a little bit. But I think the overall feeling of being able to build and create things that, that make sense and that are valuable to you is a big part of an entrepreneur's identity. And so it's very hard, I think, like you said, I don't know if it's a skill or it's like even the corporates people used to, I remember this one session that we had where, and they were like, okay, it was a day of workshopping skills and character traits. And one of the things they asked the group was, those who like to break the rules, they divided the room and said, those who like to break the rules, go to the right, and those who like to, stick to the rules, go to the left. And I sort of stood in the middle and I was like, I'm in the middle here and they were like, so what? So why are you in the middle? And I'm like, because I don't break the rules, but I bend the rules. And I bend them, but I don't stick to them. So I'm in the middle, yeah. But I think that was my identity then. I think here in the entrepreneurial identity, that bending the rules, I think, has pushed a little bit further into the breaking the rules, but not fully there yet. But I think creating my own rules is something that I really enjoy. So I think that's a skill set that I see most entrepreneurs enjoy as well, is just, being able to create things. And so if they didn't, things like Uber, Facebook, any of these large companies who have really defied the norms of how things work and how people work, I think those wouldn't come about if people didn't actually break the rules or make their own rules.
It seems to link back to another word you've used a number of times, which is choice. So you also referred to, when you were talking about choice, you work hard as an employee, bank director, and lots of people do out there. There are lots of hardworking people. We also work hard as entrepreneurs. We sort of feel we have to. We've got to make ends meet and it's all on us and stuff. So what's the difference between working hard as an employee, working hard as an entrepreneur? Is it that freedom of choice that gives that drive?
Yeah, I think freedom of choice, the fact that you can see, I think a common misconception out there is people think people jump into entrepreneurship to make money. The honest truth is the money comes a long time later. Before then, there's a lot of hard yards. There's a lot of work that needs to go in. There's a lot of testing, trial, failure, a lot of that comes along, right? And so I think there's, and people still keep pushing through with that, even though they're failing. Like I've failed so many times. So many of my businesses have failed. So the ones that I run today are doing well, but the ones that I've tried and tested, I mean, there's many that I've just shut down. And I think the drive is, so for me particularly, I think is more about being able to create things, being able to create something that didn't exist, or create something that adds value to other people, makes a difference in other people's lives. That's the reason I coach, I mentor, and I do these things, is because, and there's a lot of it is pro bono, because it's just, I'm just interested in helping you, because I love new ideas. I love new, when people come to me and say, hey, Sangeeta, I've got this great idea. I'm like, yeah, tell me more. I'm happy to sit down there, and then, if I really like it, I'm like, I'm happy to give you some advice. If you need my help, like reach out anytime, and, things like, because I just enjoy that process of ideating with people, building things, helping them do things. Which I think when you work hard in a corporate role, you're sort of working hard to meet an objective that you're a part of. You're not creating the objectives. You're sort of and it's nice, like it's in a teamwork. And to be honest, I don't want to come across like I'm bashing corporate jobs. I think that's important. For me, it was a very important period of my life where, it offered me what I needed at that point in my life. But after a point in time, it no longer served me being in those roles. And so, this is what serves my inner satisfaction and fulfillment a lot better, the entrepreneurial journey. But at that point in time, I think being an employee served me really well, because it offered me the financial stability that I needed at that point. It offered me, the skill sets, like all the skills that I've built over the employee journey is what I've brought in here, which means that I don't have to work hard from the ground up building skill sets here. I'm still building skill sets, but, I've got some certain skill sets that I can transfer over that really work in my favor. And so I think working hard as an employee is important, because I think you build a lot of things, skill sets and other things. But the difference is you're working for somebody, you're working for somebody else's vision, for somebody else's outcome. You never feel 100% ownership of it ever. It doesn't matter, even if you're the CEO, you're still an employee. And whereas in your own business, you know what you want to build out of it. And if you need to change pathways, there's nobody else you need to ask. There's nobody else that you need to, of course, as you grow bigger, you might have a board of directors, you might have a lot of those other aspects come in that may sort of outweigh it, and then you start feeling like an employee in your own business. That can happen as well. But I'm talking about the early stages. I think there's a lot of excitement for me to be able to do what I want to do and work really hard. And it's not like I work any less hours now. I probably work more hours than I used to in my corporate. But it's just the thrill of seeing something that you're working so hard towards come to life, and, add value to other people, to really get things from people. Like the reason I started entrepreneurship was because my husband made the move. My husband's a personal trainer, so he made the move into entrepreneurship. And while I was still an employee, and one of the things that I would see him do is he's a personal trainer, and he used to get these notes, and he went into corporates as well, and then he made the shift into being a personal trainer, and he would get these thank you letters from people every week, pretty much saying, you've saved my life. He would treat people in their cancer or help them with their obesity or, things like that. And they would literally write to him and send thank you notes and cards and messages. Every week he'd be getting a message or a note from somebody saying, I couldn't have achieved this without you. Like, thank you for saving my life. And I was like, oh my God, like that's impactful work. And that's the kind of work I want to do for other people too. Like, and I think so working hard for that, it's very satisfying, I feel. So it's different. I don't know if I answered your question, Brendan, but I think it's just the working hard is different, and both give you things, but it's just what they give you is different.
So much of what you said has resonated absolutely. And I think the choice to choose to use some words that we've used throughout the episode today, the choice in order to have some freedom around that, to have an impact on people's lives, and then to get some feedback, the loop back of people actually appreciating that is immensely satisfying and continues to give you that drive moving forward. I guess my own very short sort of journey, but the other thing that resonates is the work ethic side of things, absolutely, and the learning, because in my own journey, I started working full-time. I was 19, so that was the very first time I had a full-time job, but all I knew how to do was I had a work ethic that was strong, and I knew that I always wanted to learn. And those two things just set me up for everything that I was able to achieve and everything that I was able to take opportunities with. I had no idea when I was 19 that I wanted to do what I was doing today. Podcasting didn't exist. Coaches weren't a dime a dozen back then. It was, a nothing. So it's just so much power in what you're saying, and it's, again, so much simplicity, but like so many things that are simple, it's the discipline and the application and repeating those things and being consistent around it, which is super important. The other thing, Sangeeta, which, again, we're not going to unpack today, but I sense what has come through as I've listened to you today and what you've shared is, if I look at the Australian Professionals of Colour, which you've mentioned, the organisation that you founded, you have a strong purpose around that, like your own journey linked to that, and your ability to want to change people's lives and help people, particularly maybe coming from migrant backgrounds, to help them have an easier start. They're still going to work their butts off, absolutely, and they will, but you're helping, giving them a slightly easier path to that, and that's really powerful stuff in your own journey. That's what I sense.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting journey with Australian Professionals of Colour. So my co-founder Viniti came to me a couple of years ago in 2021, and she said, "Hey Sangeeta, I want to start a mentor walks for women of colour." So mentor walks, for those who don't know, is something that happens in Melbourne where, people come together for a morning walk. And, there's mentors and there's mentees, and they sort of, chat with each other. It happens once a month. And so she wanted, but we don't see a lot of people of colour in those mentor walks. And so when she came to me, she said, "I want to do this for women of colour." It was June, it was the middle of winter, and I was like, I don't think anybody's waking up at 6 a.m. to come for a mentor walk at 6 a.m. in the morning. And this was just...
Not Melbourne either.
Melbourne, right? And so it was like just in the middle of the pandemic. And I said, "But why do you want to do it?" And so she, narrated her journey around how she's had not the easiest journey in her employment in Australia, and some of the things that people told her were you will never climb the ladder because of your cultural values of respect. You don't speak up in meetings, or things like that. And she's from an Indian background, so from an Indian background, people are usually grown to there's a hierarchical aspect to it. There's always you don't speak up against senior people, somebody senior in the hierarchy. In an open forum, you would go, later and talk to them separately if you had to, and, things like that. So she was sort of criticized for that. And, she was passed over for promotions because of those things, because of her own cultural values, which is unfortunate because it has nothing to do with her competency. And so she was really, passionate about helping other women who've gone through this. And I was in the other spectrum. I was on a talent program. I don't, in hindsight, I now feel like, oh, okay, this is what people meant when they said these things. But, I'd never really felt that in my journey. Like, I'm always a person who's very focused on my goals. And once I have a goal, I put my blinders on them after, and I don't care what other people say about me. I don't care what goes on around me as such. And so I feel like, we came from two ends of the same sort of stick. And where I was like, but there's more people who can do and can achieve what I've achieved. But unfortunately, there are things that stop them, and we need to sort of work that out. And I said, and she was like, yeah, there's people who are feeling like, so let's test it out. We probably can't do a walk, but let's just open up a Facebook group and call our people and friends and family in and start some conversations and see what happens. And pretty much that's how APOC started, Australian Professionals of Colour. And I was like, I'm not, I think men go through a similar process as well. It's not just women. I think other genders have similar issues. So let's just call it Australian Professionals of Colour. And so that's really how that journey started. But eventually it's come to a point where we're looking at helping people maximize their potential. So helping people climb that corporate ladder without really feeling like there's bias, there's discrimination, there's racism. All of that exists in Australia. I think people don't acknowledge it enough. And once you acknowledge it, you can then start fixing it. But I think the fact that most people of color as well, don't acknowledge it because it's not accepted widely enough. And so what they do is when they have instances of being, racially harassed or being, discriminated against or, having attacked because of their culture, they tend to go back home, cry to their spouses, and that's pretty much it. There's nobody else out there that they can actually sit down and share these experiences with. And so this is why the community was formed, was to help people come out and speak up about things and say, okay, what can we do together to fix it? It's not a space for people to come in and complain, but it's like the lens is, how do we fix it? How do we help you get better at whatever you need to get better at from a skill set perspective? And on the other end, how do we actually go into workplaces and bring the concept of cultural intelligence into workplaces? I think we don't talk enough about cultural intelligence in this country, but we have just in Melbourne alone, over 200 ethnicities. And we still don't talk enough about cultural intelligence. Leaders are put in positions to manage multicultural teams, but they're never coached about, hey, you've got somebody from Korea in your team. Do you even know what goes on in Korea? Do you even have any idea how that person grew up? There is no cultural curiosity in Australia. People don't sit down and ask somebody who's a migrant, so what cartoons did you grow up with? What did you watch? They often talk about all the shows that happen in Australia, and I'm coming from India. I have no clue about these shows. I have no clue about the adverts that happened in 1997, right? And these are the topics that people talk about at social gatherings. And this is why people feel like they don't belong. Migrants feel like they don't belong. They feel like they feel left out or they feel secluded. And then they feel like they're misunderstood. And so there's a lot of these aspects that we're trying to bring into organizations to just spark cultural curiosity, spark a bit of cultural intelligence within organizations, and empower leaders and people to look at cultural intelligence as a skill set that they need to have if they want to lead multicultural teams. I know I'm super passionate about this. I gave you a long-winded answer.
Absolutely. And I absolutely have huge respect in you. I don't see you as a woman of color. I see you as a woman of action, which is the most important thing. You're taking action to do something about these things. But what resonates with me is, to me, it's not even, I have some understanding of what you're saying. Absolutely. I'm not experiencing myself, but where I have experienced that feeling of awkwardness and not belonging is, I spent time in the UK many years ago and was working over there for a couple of years. And it was really probably the first 12 months of that, I did feel that I didn't belong in conversations because I didn't know the TV shows that were in the UK. I didn't know the ads. I didn't know some of and that was an Aussie white man with, I guess, colonial English heritage going to an English place. And I didn't feel like I belonged. It took me 12 months to be able to contribute to the conversation in some meaningful way.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you can imagine how hard for people coming from, as far as, say, Colombia or Paraguay or,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. South Africa, they don't know.
So, Sangeeta, let me ask you, what cartoons did you watch? I'm very interested.
Oh, there's so many shows. The one that I can remember now is Tom and Jerry. Obviously, that was a few grew up now. Fantastic. But also, when I was growing up, but my father was running a business and my mom was not yet in business from the time that I'm talking about, which is when I was maybe 4 or 5. And TV was a new thing in India. And so we had this, these channels. We just had one channel and everything would play on that. And so, cartoons were not something that were there every day or we could watch when we wanted to. Like now people can watch cartoons all the time if they wanted to, right? And so, so it was, classic cartoons for what would play on TV. I'm often asked if, Indians can speak English. And I'm like, yeah, we grew up speaking English. I was educated in English all my life. So, these misconceptions happen.
You speak better English than me, Sangeeta.
No, I have to say, when I say, oh, we used to watch Tom and Jerry, was it in your local language? No, it was in English. I watched Tom and Jerry in English. oh, you didn't need language because it was a silent cartoon, but instinct like that. And then when I was growing up a little bit more, I think it was, I don't know if you remember this show, Small Wonder.
I don't know.
Yeah, so there was this little girl who was as a robot. American shows, I think, were more popular in India. We used to watch a lot of American shows on TV. And then there was a lot of Indian local language shows that would go on. So, like the classics being Mahabharata and Ramayana, which are epic tales from India. So those would come on every Sunday. Every Sunday morning, the whole family would gather in front of the TV and watch these shows. So, yeah.
Beautiful times. I hope I've given you an opportunity to reminisce a little bit.
Yes, you have. Thank you.
Sangeeta, I know our time is running short. So like we ask all of our guests as our final question, what's the one thing that's helped you become a more confident leader?
That's a very interesting question. I'll have to think about this. But I think for me, the opportunity to work with many different kinds of people over time, I think, is what helps me be a more confident leader. And I think the key piece that I would point out maybe is the value of being able to give back. I think for me, giving is probably the key piece. So when I approach things, for me, it's like, what can I give? Whether it's a conversation, whether it's I'm speaking at an event, or whether I'm leading a team of people, it comes from a place of what is it that I can give? And I think that makes me more confident, because when I think of it more as what can I give, it's I have control over it. And so that creates confidence in me as a person.
Music to my ears, Sangeeta. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you very much for contributing and sharing your thoughts around, and based on real experience, that employee to entrepreneur journey. Fascinating stuff. Once again, thanks for being a fantastic guest on the Cultural Leadership today.
Thank you, Brandon. Really enjoyed it.
As I moved up the corporate ladder, my experiences were similar to Sangeeta's. Most senior leaders are invested in themselves and not others. At the Culture of Leadership, you work hard every day to change that. These are my 3 key takeaways from my conversation with Sangeeta. My first key takeaway: confident leaders don't play politics. They prioritise the needs of the team and don't manipulate situations for personal gain. In my own experience of working with leaders in large organisations, insecure leaders play politics, confident leaders don't. My second key takeaway: confident leaders own their destiny. And being the master of your own fate isn't exclusive to entrepreneurship. You don't have to be an entrepreneur to chart your own course. Even as an employee, you can seize control, shape your path, and own your destiny. My third key takeaway: confident leaders build a circle of trust. This is a hand-picked group that's a trusted sounding board. It includes mentors, coaches, or confidants, people who offer development insights and timely advice. Leveraging the circle of trust means confident leaders receive the right support at the right time. So in summary, my 3 key takeaways were: confident leaders don't play politics, confident leaders own their destiny, and confident leaders build a circle of trust. Let me know your key takeaway on YouTube or at thecultureofleadership.com. Thanks for joining me, and remember, the best outcome is on the other side of a genuine conversation.